One.
Hi, I'm Mark Mayer, and Mary Dreyer, the director who's doing the filming on this, informed me that, it'd be really interesting since you were a professional photographer for a lot of years and you grew up in the photography business because my dad was a photographer, if you would kind of show people what film was all about. Because now with digital, you don't use film. And it was kind of a pain, but it was a miracle when it actually came to everything that came along. And to do this, you almost have to do a little bit of history. And the history on film is Eastman Kodak, George Eastman, and nobody knows where the name Kodak came from, was the first person to come along and do film photography. And his first cameras that were made in 1884 were made so that you sent them into Kodak, they loaded the camera, you sent it back to you, you took pictures, which were 110 very small pictures, and then you sent the film back in, or the camera back in, and that was it. Well, amazingly enough, he figured out that just wasn't an effective process. So he went to his engineers, and he looked at his engineers in 1890, or somewhere around 1899, and said, look, we need to develop a camera. But George Eastman was a smart man, because he said, I want to develop a camera, and this is it, that all you have to do is load it, point it, and shoot it. And he said, oh, by the way, I want it small enough to fit in a woman's hand, because that's kind of who takes the majority of the pictures in a family. And that's what he did. And so then you could load your own camera, and you could then send that film into a processor, which Kodak sold all the chemicals to process, or you could send it to Eastman Kodak. The interesting thing was, it was not real hard to load, but it was still such an advancement, because you put the film here, you had to do it in the dark, and then you brought it around, and there was a roll that you stuck it on, you shot the pictures, you advanced the film from there, and that's what did it. Now, to show you what kind of effect that was in the photography business, or in the amateur photography, he came out with this camera in 1900. And there's varying stories, but he had sold somewhere around 354,000 cameras in 16 years. He came out with this, and the varying stories are, some say that it took a year, some say it took 6 months. He sold 150,000 of these cameras. And worldwide, that was just in the United States. Worldwide, this camera, or a version of this camera, became the Brownie Camera. And that's exactly what it was. And in 1912, when he celebrated 50 years of being in photography, he gave one of these cameras to every 12-year-old in America. Well, now, that doesn't sound like much when you say, well, the camera was only $1. But at that point in time, $1 was $31. So this was an affordable camera, but what a great thing for a kid. They ended up getting a camera that they could use, and of course, was he dumb? No, he made money on processing. He didn't make money on and film. He didn't make money necessarily on the cameras. That was just a means to an end. So I always tell people, we don't think of people as being very smart. We say, oh, well, they weren't technically this, they weren't technically that. We had a lot of smart people in that age. He also decided, and this will be the last camera I show you, that the format should be a little bigger, because this camera produced, I think, around 70 photos. But what happened was they were 2 1/4. They weren't very large. Now, if you look around this museum, I think you'll find, because this camera was 1929, this one was 1930. And this is a little bigger format, in other words, a little bigger film. And you'll see all kinds of pictures of Abby Gardner Sharp. Anything that's taken before, I would say 1940, you're probably going to have a picture that was taken with a Brownie camera. And hence why grandmas called every camera a Brownie. So that's how that worked. We'll go on to the next camera here in just a second.